My name is Mabel Carter, and I'm 68 years old. I live at the end of a dusty dirt road where the sand blows in the windows every time the wind kicks up. This mobile home is a half-mile walk from the nearest gas station. There's no fence, just a few scraggly cacti and some rusty metal trash cans that creak like crazy whenever the wind blows. Folks say it must be lonely out here, but it's enough for me. Nobody bothers me. And I don't bother anyone. My place is one of those old mobile homes, faded siding, a roof that sags a little from that hailstorm last year, and a faint smell of old particle board that still lingers in the kitchen cabinets. But I keep it clean the way someone who's seen a lot of blood and dirt would, scrubbing every corner, folding every hand towel just right, washing my teacup as soon as I'm done. Every morning, I wake up at 6, open the little kitchen window blinds, flick on the electric kettle, and wait for that click when the water's boiled. I drink black tea, no sugar. Not because I like it that way, but because I can't remember the last time I bought sugar. I've always got black tea though. I made it a habit to buy a whole case at the end of the year, when it's on sale at the supermarket 15 miles away. I used to be an army medic. I was stationed with a field hospital unit in the Gulf back in '91. Nobody ever asks a nurse about the things she's seen. And I don't talk about it much either. But it's still there, the image of a young soldier on a metal table, his hand trembling in pain, eyes wet, calling out mama in a voice that barely sounded human. I held his hand until he stopped squeezing. Not a day goes by that I don't think about the people who died that I couldn't save. Some people call it PTSD. I don't think so. I think it's just memory. And memories don't die. They just lie dormant, waiting to be awakened. My husband, Mr. Carter, was a soldier too. He came home with a terminal case of liver cancer. 6 months later, he was gone. I didn't cry then, nor on the anniversary of his death, or 5 years later, but sometimes when I'm washing dishes. With the hot water steaming on my hands, I suddenly remember that he promised he'd fix the old gas stove. I still haven't fixed it. It's like if I do, the promise will disappear for good. I have a son, Jack. He got married and moved to another state. We stay in touch with a few texts each month. But gradually, the texts got shorter, then turned into just a thumbs-up emoji. I understand. He has his own life. It's not that he doesn't love me. It's just that he's busy being an adult. I'm not angry, just sad. But even that sadness isn't sharp anymore. It's worn down, like calluses on your hands, from picking cotton for too long. I'm used to it. There's always a light on in my kitchen at night. A small yellow bulb above the microwave, installed back when Mr. Carter was still round. He said, "We'll leave this light on, so when you wake up in the middle of the night, you won't feel lost in the dark." After he passed, I kept up the habit, not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because I'm afraid of waking up and finding everything turned off, with nothing left to wait for. Some nights, I sit at the old kitchen table, watching the light cast shadows on my wrinkled hands that once bandaged hundreds of people, now just make tea and wipe down the counters. But I still keep them clean, because I believe if I keep things tidy, I'll still have a reason to open my eyes each morning. Out in the yard, I planted a few wildflowers. The cacti are thriving, but the other plants are withered. Even though I water them regularly, I don't pull them out. I leave them there as a reminder that not everything you care for will blossom. But you still have to care, because if you don't, there's nothing left to do After 30 minutes of news, my AM radio switches over to playing old country songs from the 60s. Some of them I've heard 100 times. I still remember the lyrics and get a familiar twinge in my heart every time the intro starts. It's alright. Sometimes I know those songs better than I know the names of my own relatives. I don't feel lonely the way young people talk about. Not that nobody cares about me or I'm not loved kind of thing. I just feel like I've fallen out of step with everyone else's lives. I'm standing on the sidelines, quiet, not bothering anyone, not expecting anyone to visit. And I guess that's how it'll be until I can't wake up anymore. I've arranged everything so that the end won't be a hassle for anyone. My papers are in the bottom drawer. My health insurance card is right there. I don't have any debts, and I don't need special care. I can take care of myself. Just like that, until one day I slip away as quietly as Mr. Carter did. There's only one thing I hadn't thought about: letting anyone back into my life. Never considered it. Never wanted it. But life has its own way, and one try. Windy afternoon. The day I'd just finished my second cup of tea. I saw it. A German shepherd standing at the edge of the property. Not barking. Not growling. Just standing there, silent, looking at me as if it had been waiting for a long time. He came back the next morning, by the edge of the wire fence, where a low tree cast a shadow over half his face. The dog was big, dark-furred, staring at me without blinking, not barking, not pawing, not trying to get in, just standing there, as if waiting for me to decide. I didn't open the door. I just put a plastic plate on the porch step with half a slice of stale bread left over from her night before. I said, not loud, not soft, if you're hungry, eat it. Then I shut the door, but I didn't close it all the way, just enough to peek through the gap. He came, not eagerly, gently ate the food I had left for him. After that, he went back to his spot under the tree, curled up, resting his head on his front paws, not taking his eyes off my porch. That afternoon, I went out a little closer, about 3 steps away. I could see clearly. This dog had a scar running from his left thigh down to his hip, an old, thick scar, like he'd been ripped open and stitched back together. When he looked up, I saw a flash of silver on his collar, a metal tag, worn at the edges, hanging from a frayed fabric strap. I leaned closer to look. Blitz K9 unit retired. I stood there for a moment. The name didn't mean anything to me yet. But K9 unit, that phrase hit me like an echo. Old, heavy, familiar. I'd seen dogs like that before, in the field hospital. They were trained to sniff out bombs, find people buried under rubble, even flush the enemy out of bunkers. Everyone was a soldier. And, like soldiers, when their time was up, they were retired. Some were lucky enough to be adopted. Some disappeared into the system somewhere. I looked at Blitz again. At that moment, I didn't call his name or think about taking him in. I just saw a creature that had served, that had a purpose, now lying, still in my yard as if it was all over. I went back inside. But that night, I left a dish of water next to the plate of bread, and I left the kitchen light on all night, like always. The next morning, he was still there, not lying down anymore, standing, but not coming any closer. I went out on the porch, opened the door wider, and made myself a cup of tea. 10 minutes later, I heard a light scratching of paws on the wooden floor. Not a plea, not a demand, just the sound of deliberate footsteps, as if he was announcing, "May I come in?" I didn't answer. I pulled the old chair near the door, sat down, and put my teacup on my lap. He came in, not sniffing round, not exploring, went straight to the corner under the kitchen table, turned around, and laid down as if he knew that spot was meant for him. Blitz lived as if he'd learned how not to bother anyone. He didn't bark when cars drove by, didn't howl when the radio siren sounded. He didn't steal food, didn't beg for scraps every time I put a dish down. He waited for me to step away before he came near. I didn't tell anyone I was letting a dog stay. There was no one to tell. But I talked to him. I told him about working 3 straight nights in the field hospital, where it was just me and an old doctor desperately trying to bandage, give IVs, and stop the bleeding for dozens of people wounded by artillery fire. I told him about the time I sat for hours just to keep a young soldier from falling off the operating table, because he wouldn't stop thrashing. He was calling for his mother, but there was no mother who could come. I even told him about the last meal I had with Mr. Carter. He couldn't eat much, a spoonful of porridge, have a glass of water, but he still looked at me and said, "You still make it as good as ever." I knew he was saying it to make me happy. That day, I'd forgotten to add salt. Blitz didn't react, but he stayed there when I stopped talking. He didn't leave, as if someone had taught him that sometimes listening is enough. A week later, I brought out an old blanket. One of those wool blankets they used to issue to soldiers. I washed it, spread it out in the kitchen corner. Blitz lay down on it as if he knew that smell. Sometimes he breathed quietly, his breath uneven, as if he was dreaming. I looked at him and realized that I used to be like that too, sleeping with my heart still on guard for something I couldn't name. I hadn't touched him yet. I still kept my distance. Maybe it was habit, or maybe it was because I didn't want to get attached to anything that could leave. But one morning, when I dropped my teacup on the floor, Blitz sprang into action, not barking, not grueling. He just stood between me and the hot liquid, looking at me, waiting for a reaction. I said, "It's okay," and he stepped back. That night, I gently stroked his head once, without saying a word, and I thought, maybe I'd just let another creature into my life. Not with words, but with actions. I didn't know what unit Blitz had been in. Didn't know who had trained him, who had relied on him in the dark. But I saw in his eyes the same thing I'd seen in the mirror: weariness, vigilance, and a little something like regret. That morning, there was a burnt smell carried on the wind from somewhere. I hadn't burned anything, but the breeze brought with it that familiar scent, like heated rubber, like the dust of a car braking hard on asphalt. I stood on the porch, tea in hand, my eyes scanning the dirt slope below, where a few pickup trucks often cut through to avoid the checkpoint. Blitz was lying beneath the porch steps. His head was resting on his front paws, his eyes half closed, as if he were asleep. But I knew he wasn't really sleeping. He was just waiting. Blitz was always like that, calm, orderly, and aware of everything moving around him. I was about to go back inside when he jumped up, not barking, just jumping up, his head held high, his ears perked, his eyes fixed on the dirt slope. Then he took off running, without hesitation, without waiting for me to react. "Blitz," I called. But he didn't stop. The gray blur raced down the slope, past the cacti, then vanished behind a cloud of red dust kicked up by the wind. I set my tea down on the table, slipped on my boots, and grabbed my wooden cane that I usually use for back support. My legs couldn't run anymore, but they were still good enough to walk. Slow, steady, and without stopping. I followed him down the slope, my heart pounding with the headwind and a feeling I couldn't name. I heard a child crying before I saw him. A wet, broken cry, like he was choking. When I got closer to the dry ditch by the road, I saw Blitz standing in front of a little boy, maybe 5 years old. Brown hair, dusty clothes, knees scraped and bleeding. The boy was shaking, clutching a small, worn backpack. Blitz wasn't looking at the boy. He was growling, a low, steady, and fearsome growl, directed at a pickup truck parked less than 10 yards away. 2 men stood near the truck. Both were wearing rumpled t-shirts and sunglasses, looking round as if weighing what to do next. One of them took a half-step forward, then froze as Blitz shifted, baring his teeth. "We were just trying to help him find his way home," one of the men said. His voice didn't sound convincing. I didn't answer. I walked quickly forward, placing myself between the boy and the 2 men, clutching my cane tightly. Blitz didn't budge from his position. "I've already called the police," I said. I hadn't, but I pulled out my phone as if I were dialing the other man's side, backing slowly toward the truck. They both got in and drove away, not hurrying, but not looking back either. Only when the engine noise had faded did Blitz relax. He turned toward the boy, gently nudging him with his nose as if checking on him. I sank to my knees, out of breath. The boy was still shaking. I asked, "What's your name?" He answered quietly, "Tommy." I took Tommy back to the house. Blitz walked beside us, never leaving our side. The boy told me he'd fallen out of the truck when his parents were arguing in the nearby convenience store. They didn't know how far. He'd wandered. Tommy didn't remember the phone number, only his mother's name and the sticker on the back of their car. The police arrived about 30 minutes later. I told them everything. Gave them the address of the convenience store. A young officer promised to find his family. He bent down to pet Blitz, flipped over his collar tag, then looked at me. This dog used to be with the bomb squad in Bosra. I met a few like him when I was stationed there in 2010. He said, his voice softening, "Just like people. Those war dogs, they remember. They know who's afraid, who needs protecting." After the police took Tommy away, I went back into the kitchen. Blitz followed, showing no sign of anything different. He wasn't proud. He wasn't asking for praise. He just laid down, as if it had been just another mission carried out properly. I sat down in my chair, poured myself more tea. The old cup was cold now. I poured a new cup and looked at Blitz. "You were the first person in this house to run to help someone in a long time, and I haven't run for anyone in ages." Blitz closed his eyes. No reaction. But something in the silence made me feel like I wasn't living alone anymore. That night, I let Blitz sleep inside. No blanket, no cushion. I wasn't worried about him getting the floor dirty or stepping on things. I just wanted him in there, close to me, and nowhere else. I made another cup of tea and set it on the table across from me. I didn't know if Blitz liked the smell of tea, but I felt like the kitchen had another presence, not with words, but with breath, with being there. I sat watching the yellow light cast shadows on the floor. Then I thought of Tommy, thought of the way the boy looked at Blitz when he was being protected, as if Blitz was the only one in his life who wouldn't abandon him in danger. Some things don't need to be said, and some creatures, like Blitz, are born not to listen, But to understand, we weren't two strangers in a house anymore. We were two old warriors, one human, one dog, who had been through the battlefield, and now just wanted peace. But peace also meant being ready to protect something that was still alive. Even if it was just a lost little boy or a lonely old woman. After what happened by the ditch, Tommy started visiting regularly, not every day, but a few times a week. He'd stand outside the door, clutching his worn backpack, quietly calling Blitz's name. I'd hear his voice before I saw him. Then the small head would appear behind the scraggly fence. I started keeping a glass of milk ready for him. The boy didn't talk much, just sat on the floor, playing with Blitz, saying a few words about school, about his grandma who slept all day, about the mother he hadn't seen in months. Just like that, my house had more breath, more footsteps, the sound of people rustling on the kitchen table. Blitz was still the same, not loud, not destructive. He lay quietly, listening to Tommy, sometimes nudging his hand with his nose, the way he used to do with me. I didn't know how much he understood, but the way he stayed close made me think. He knew the boy needed someone nearby, just like I had needed. Then one day Blitz didn't get up when I opened the window in the morning. Normally, the sound of the space heater turning on was enough to make him stretch, yawn, and walk to the kitchen to wait for a food. But that day he lay still. I walked over, called his name. He opened his eyes slowly, his eyes cloudier, his breathing light, not exactly tired, but more like weary. I took him to the vet in town. The young woman, wearing a white coat, examined him, then said, "He's getting old, with the old injury to his leg and spine. It might be affecting his nerves now. He's just getting weaker. You can give him medication to help him." But she didn't finish the sentence. I understood. No need to say it. I used to be a nurse. I knew the look of someone who knows what's coming. I'd seen that look in the mirror too. When Mr. Carter was lying in his sick bed, I took Blitz home. No need for a medicine. I just wanted him here, in the house he'd chosen to stay in. That night, Tommy came by. I hadn't called him, but he still came, as if he knew something was wrong. I let the boy sit next to Blitz. He didn't cry. He took an old handkerchief from his backpack, minus blue, with small, faded stars printed on it, and gently placed it on Blitz's back. It belonged to my mom. Tommy said, "I've kept it for a long time. Now I think Blitz needs it more." I didn't say anything. My throat was tight. That night, I sat in the old chair, not sleeping. Blitz lay at my feet, the handkerchief covering his back. I didn't hear breathing anymore, just a different kind of quiet, not cold, not painful, but clearly. He wasn't there anymore. I didn't call anyone to take Blitz away. The next morning, I wrapped him in the blanket, placed him carefully in a small wooden box I used to store firewood. I carried him to the corner of the yard, where the low tree cast its shade and the wildflowers hadn't quite bloomed yet. I filled the grave myself, not rushing, not crying, just quiet, quiet like the way Blitz had entered my life. Not loud, not forceful, just staying because he chose to. That night, I still left the kitchen light on. The old yellow bulb cast a gentle glow over the kitchen table. The spot where Blitz used to lie was empty now, the wool blanket folded on the chair. I didn't clean anything up. I left it as it was, as if Blitz would be back tomorrow. Tommy still visits, not every day, but still regularly. Some days he just sits, not saying anything. I don't ask questions. We sit together, listening to the radio, drinking tea and milk. Blitz wasn't there anymore, but the peace he left behind hadn't faded. People often ask me why I still leave the light on all night, even though I'm all alone. I don't answer, but I think if they'd ever lived through war, ever been in the dark, ever lost someone they loved, then they would understand. The kitchen light is on to know I'm still here, and someone, even if it was just an old dog, chose to stay with me until the very end. That light, it still shines, even though Blitz is gone. But I'm still here, making tea and waiting for something. Nothing big, just enough to make my heart feel less empty.